Greetings duelists, and welcome to another video. So, I think it's time to talk about this. I think after a couple of weeks, this is one of the best moments to be discussing the current state of the format and what should we expect moving forward. What I'm showing you here on the screen is the current metagame breakdown for this past week in the OCG, and I'm going to show you something very interesting. This is the past current format in the past current week in the TCG. Do you notice something similar? In the OCG, you have 28% Ryziel, 25% Malice, and 10% Blue Eyes. In the TCG, you have 30% Ryziel, 28% Malice, and 12% Blue Eyes. I think we've gotten to a point where the format is not only just defined, but is pretty much stagnant. And it's both in the OCG and the TCG. I want you to understand, the OCG has a lot of cards that we do not. And not only that, both Ryziel and Malice get significantly stronger in the OCG. Well, in the TCG later this year due to cards that are in the OCG. So the fact that we see the format exactly the same for both eras kind of tells you that it is solidified the positioning of what the current state of the format is, and maybe some things should be addressed or might be addressed in the future. Before I talk about my general consensus of the format, I kind of want to make awareness of everything that has been going on. We've been in this format for 12 weeks now, so, and that's a really good amount of time. Usually, Forbidden Limited lists happen after the 14th to the 15th week. In the TCG, while in the OCG, like, the formats are already established. I think their next Forbidden Limited list should be either on March or on April. I don't remember. I think it's every 3 months. But yeah, things to talk about. Let's go with here. So, when it comes to Ryziel and when it comes to Malice, I'm not gonna talk about Malice that much. If you are interested in my thoughts behind Malice and the weaknesses and strengths of the deck and things that should be addressed with the deck, watch my Underground series. It is I make a series of videos that talk about Malice as a whole and the adaptations that people should be taking when it comes to awareness of this deck. I will post that in the description. The one thing I will talk about Malice that I haven't talked about in depth on those videos is a lot of people have the common misconception that Nibiru is like a really strong like oppressor or suppressor against the deck. And my disclaimer is, if you're smart enough with Malice, you shouldn't be losing to Nibiru. Those are just my 2 cents. But we're gonna talk about both of them as a whole. In the past 3 months, we've been seeing a war between tech cards and side deck cards for Ryziel and against Ryziel. Same thing with Malice. We've been seeing like a non-engine war between both archetypes. And that pretty much tells you that a lot of people are very, very serious when it comes to dealing with these decks. Are these decks a problem in the game right now? I think Ryziel and Malice are way less oppressive than other tier 1 strategies that we've had in the past. Think about stuff like Jubel when Phantom was at 3. Think about Snake Eye as a Mina Fiendsmith. Think about stuff like Full Power T Elements, Full Power Kashtira, Unchained, Rescue Ace. Like, if we look at the past couple of years, I think this format is way more manageable than the past ones, just because there are way more answers for people's decks than we've had on past formats. We do have issues to talk about when it comes to these decks. There are good news and bad news. The good news is, since we're in a 2-deck format, you kind of have a good amount of wiggle room when it comes to like specific side deck cards for these decks. The bad news is that some cards that are very, very strong against Rizal and Malice are actually very popular in the format. And not only that, but cards that are just can fit those decks to be played against other strategies are very popular in this format. We're talking about Artifact Lancia, Dweller, Shifter, Droll, Dimensional Barrier, just to speak about a few of them. Like, it's very, very hard for rogue decks to keep up with Rizal and Malice when the tech cards that are being played in Rizal and Malice or against Rizal and Malice are just way too strong against those other decks. Like, if these cards were not a factor, I can tell you right now, Memento, Crystron, Mermail would have been just good enough to keep up with Rizal and Malice. But the fact is, with these cards being very popular, these decks would just fall short to these cards that are just being represented in the metagame. I want to talk about briefly about Traptrix real quick. You're probably wondering, why is this card in? Why is Mermelio in here? Is Traptrix a real deck? And Traptrix is indeed a real deck. Like, this was last weekend. It topped a 300-person regional. This was last month in the OCG. It topped a regional as well. And you notice there are no Rizal cards in here. So, yeah, this is a very sufficient rank 4 strategy. And, like, as you can see, it's not really a fluke. The decks are built very, very similar. This one has Droll in the side deck, while this one has Droll in the main. This one is side decking. This one is side decking Parallel Exceed, which is weird because this one has it in the main deck. But yeah, I kind of want to talk. I just wanted to talk about Traptrix real quick before going back to the rogue discussion. But yeah, rogue decks do have a chance this format, but the problem is the cards that kill the rogue decks are very popular in this format. Let's talk about Fiendsmith. Does Fiendsmith need a hit? Do we have to worry about Fiendsmith? Well, if you look here, you're probably noticing that Fiendsmith is actually being very, very low represented this past week. In the OCG as well, but the fact is, Fiendsmith was already hit in the OCG, so it's not fair to compare Fiendsmith in the OCG than in the TCG. While in the TCG, Fiendsmith has yet to be hit. However, the problem is some of these really common side deck cards or like oppressive cards that are really strong in the format are also really strong against Fiendsmith. Adding to that, Malice is like the second best deck, and Malice is just the worst matchup for Fiendsmith as a whole, or anything that involves Fiendsmith cards. So, whether or not Fiendsmith is justified to get hit on the next Forbidden list kind of falls into the presumptions of, are the cards against Fiendsmith going to get hit as well? Yeah, basically, what I'm trying to talk about when it comes to this video is what do I think about this format? If we're expecting a Forbidden Limited list very, very soon, I think what's happening here and what's happening here it's up to debate whether or not it's good for the format for a long term. If you remember last year on 2024, we were stuck in Snake Eye Purgatory for 6 to 8 months. Is 6 to 8 months good enough to keep Ryziel and Malice around in the format? Is hitting Ryziel and Malice good enough to justify the other rogue decks that are running around? Because I'm gonna tell you right now, if you haven't faced Memento, like them making their full board, this is one of those really, really strong decks to be dealing with. Same thing with Crestron, or Centurion rather. Centurion, White Forest, Crestron, Mermaid Atlantean, all these decks are really, really powerful if you take away all these other cards. These are very, very strong decks that could just outright win the game by themselves if you don't know what you're doing against them. And outside of silver bullet cards and lingering floodgates, these decks do very, very well against 1-for-1 interactions. Think of these decks as other versions of Malice if Malice phases out of the format. So right now, that's what has been brainstorming in my head as of the moment. I think Ryziel and Malice keeping those very oppressive decks in check is good for the game. I do think Ryziel and Malice are decks that with enough practice and with enough research, you should be doing well against. However, I also see the other side of the equation where people think Ryziel and Malice are way too oppressive against the current format. And there's a reason why these are the best decks. These decks didn't make it to being the best two decks just because there are safe picks for the format. No, Ryziel and Malice legit are very strong and powerful decks. Malice is way more powerful than Ryziel, but Ryziel can play non-engine cards better than Malice. And we're in a heavy non-engine format. The fact that both these decks can play a lot of non-engine, if you look at the Malice hit list right here, you see Fualos, Ash, Droll, Maxi. You see the counters to the Maxi, you see Imperm, you see Impulse. That's a lot of non-engine cards. The more non-engine cards you can play in your deck, the better your deck will be in the format. And right now, Ryziel and Malice are just the two best decks that can do that. Alright. I hope you found this informative to an understanding. I know that I brought up a lot of points that are just very familiar to the TCG and OCG players. But I kind of wanted to voice my concerns because in a way, I really do like this format. I do like that we have way more non-engine interactions that are justified than in past formats. What I don't like about this format is this. This is the part that I don't like about this format. And sadly, as long as Malice and Ryziel are the best decks right now, these are going to be the cards you're going to be seeing more often than not. And that's kind of sad if you're a rogue player. Those are my general consensus. Whether or not these will be addressed in the next Forbidden Limited list is up to Konami's debate. Right now, this is pretty much a very divided topic. Not many people will be in agreement or disagreement whether or not floodgate cards or turn ending cards or skip turning cards are justified in the game. Because of just how powerful some of these decks are if those cards are unchecked. That's enough rambling. I hope you found this video to your liking understanding. Keep practicing and keep dueling.